Hi guys, this is Hero. How's everyone doing today? So today I'm going to be discussing, yes, the Mercury retrograde transit in the sign of Virgo. Okay, I'm finally back from vacation, so I wanted to make this video immediately so you guys can have a little bit over a week to look at this video before the retrograde actually starts. Hope you guys enjoyed the divisional chart videos while I was on vacation. I did notice the view counts were a little bit low for those videos, which I wasn't surprised about, but those videos definitely needed to get released. So I just thought, why not schedule them while I'm on vacation? And one other thing, I know you guys, not too many of you guys are interested in that stuff, but I'd strongly encourage you to just take a glance at those charts every now and then, and just to kind of see if you notice anything. And if you do need more information on them, like I said, you can always feel free to watch those videos at any point in time. Kind of why I released them while I was on vacation, when there was not when I already finished the more important transit videos before I left. But now I'm back, so now the next set of transit videos for September will start. So this is, I would say, the most important. So now Mercury retrograde in Virgo. I already made a video on the Mercury going into Virgo from the beginning, and I kind of explained the flow of Mercury through this sign. I'm gonna explain it again real quick just because it's important. Mercury, it enters Virgo like on August 20th. Now, when it enters Virgo, it's less than 3 weeks out from going retrograde. Okay, so, or let's just say about 3 weeks out. It's about 3 weeks out from going retrograde. It's gonna start slowing down at about 3 weeks before. Okay, now, I don't know about you guys, but immediately right when it entered Virgo, I could feel the effect of it slowing down. Like it was very strong. And I'm going to explain to you why it's very strong in a second. But I noticed, and a bunch of people have messaged me noticing, that they can already feel it slowing down. Like for a whole 3 weeks before, it was really, really, really strong, this retrograde. Okay, like you can already immediately feel it. Usually, the super strong effects are not until about 10 days before. You kind of start to notice it 2 weeks before, and 10 days before you really notice it, and 7 to 10 days. But this time it's like 3 weeks out, you can already kind of feel it strong. Now, it's slowing down going through Virgo, and right at about September 9th-ish, September 10th, depending on where you live and all this kind of stuff, it goes backwards. Now, it goes backwards right at its peak exaltation point, which is important, and I'm going to explain why in a second. So it goes backwards from 15 degrees Virgo. It's peak exaltation point going backwards. And then, right at the beginning of Virgo sign, it says, all right, you know what? I'm done going retrograde. Now I'm going forward again. Okay. Now, these points are very, very, not just coincidental, but very, very pivotal. Why? Because this tells me that Mercury has a very, very strong specific agenda that it wants to complete. So, if you don't know, the scriptures say, whenever a planet is retrograde but in a debilitation sign, it's good, even though it's debilitated. Now, when a planet is retrograde but in its exaltation sign, it's bad. Now, obviously, the terms bad and good are kind of relative, but I'm going to kind of explain to you what they were trying to say so that you can kind of understand why you feel the retrograde so strongly now. And you can kind of apply those concepts of debilitation and exaltation to opposite sign and own sign. Okay, I have a video on own sign, opposite sign, debilitation, and exaltation. I have another video on it explaining all of it. And I have another general video on retrograde and stationary energies in another video if you want just more information on just those topics by itself. But I will continue. So just in case you're kind of like, oh, where did you know, why are you saying this? And I don't explain it right now, or I don't explain it fully, you can watch those videos just to see. But okay, whenever a planet is in its own sign, that's kind of like its favorite spot. Okay, especially its primary sign. Okay, or its multicone sign. Now, when a planet is in its exaltation sign, that's a planet's direct best placement for spiritual elevation. Notice how I said direct best placement. Okay, indirectly, a planet could get spiritual elevation from almost any spot, including debilitation. That's why people with a lot of debilitated planets, indirectly over time, they get spiritual elevation. But continuing, so Mercury is the only planet that gets exalted and in its own main sign. In its own sign in general, but it's its own main sign also. So it's in its favorite spot, and it's directly the best for spiritual elevation. Okay, so you think, oh yeah, it's really great. But now you have to apply the concept, and it is really great usually, but now you have to apply the concept of retrograde. So what retrograde means is that, I'll explain stationary afterwards, because technically right now it's stationary, but since the video is on retrograde, I'll explain retrograde first. What retrograde means is that the planet's kind of like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be going in this direction. To sum it up real quick, that's what it means, okay? Stationary is kind of like the awareness of the planet. It's an increased awareness of the planet. Sometimes an increased awareness when it's retrograde, and sometimes an increased awareness when it's progressive. But you could watch more on that retrograde video if you want more information. But basically, when a planet goes retrograde, it's like basically saying, hey, I don't really want to be here. Okay? Now, you apply the two concepts I just said, the retrograde and the own/exaltation sign. So Mercury, it's in its own best sign. It's where it wants to be, needs to be the best, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, yeah, you know what? I don't, even though I kind of like it and it's really good for me, I don't want to be here right now, right? This is why the scriptures say, if the planet is retrograde and exalted at the same time, it's not that great. This is kind of why. Okay, it's in a really great spot, but the awareness of the planet is like, dude, I really don't want to be here. Which is like, kind of like, that's not good, because it's doing things to get away from that spot. And vice versa. If it's in debilitated or an opposite sign, but it's retrograde, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm not where I want to be. I'm not where I need to be necessarily. But I don't want to be here. So it's like really, really good. It's like, let me just give you an example real quick of an example in your life. The retrograde exaltation is like, and I give more examples in the retrograde video itself, but let's just say you're dating someone and they're really good for you. They're like, they check all your boxes, family loves them, they do everything you want. There's like absolutely nothing wrong with them at all. But you're just like, see ya. Like, all right, like in your head, you're like, kind of just feel like leaving. That's kind of like what this retrograde exaltation means. What retrograde and debilitated is the opposite. This person that you're with is complete disaster. Like, nothing's good at all. Family hates them, friends hate them, whatever. And now you're like, yeah, you know what? I really need to leave. So I hope you can see how the retrograde is impacting different scenarios here. Okay, you can apply the same thing for job. Let's just say the retrograde exaltation or a retrograde own sign. It's kind of like a job that you really love, or a job that you really, really, it's going to be really good for you in the long run, but you're just like, nah, I don't really feel like it. Or retrograde but debilitated or retrograde opposite sign. It's like job that you hate, super low pay, don't hate it, absolutely nothing's going to be good in the long run when it comes to experience or anything like that. And you're like, yeah, you know what? I really need to get out of this place. So I hope you can see that. Now, apply that concept to this. So Mercury, it's in its favorite. It's the only planet that can get exalted in its own sign. And it's like, yeah, I don't want to be here, right? This is obviously not the best. And this is obviously why some of you guys can be feeling it very, very, very pronouncedly right now already while it's stationary. So I explained in the stationary video, there's 4 stages of stationary. The first 2 stages, and I'm going to discuss the first one right now because that's actually what's going on, and technically the only stationary one before the retrograde. It's not only slowing speed, but it's slowing more speed every day. Like it's getting slower and slower and slower and slower every day. And the rate at which it's slowing down, or the rate at which the planet is approaching the speed of 0, is also increasing. Okay, so it's really like, whoa, like slowing down to the maximum. Like it's like right now you could feel before the retrograde, like it's like you're just all of a sudden getting aware of certain things, or you guys could be getting into little you guys could be noticing that you're expressing yourself a lot more verbally. Okay. And I'm going to explain to you in a second what you should do during the retrograde. But you probably are noticing this. If you notice these kind of things, I would strongly, strongly, strongly recommend that you pay very close attention when it goes retrograde, because it might impact you a little bit stronger here. Now, one thing to notice here is that Mercury is across from Jupiter. So Mercury and Jupiter are both in their own signs, aspecting each other, which is usually great because it's like the rational intelligence and the spiritual intelligence are both in their own signs, affecting each other, complementing each other. This is usually really great. However, they are both, with Jupiter's retrograde and Mercury is about to go retrograde. So it's like now they're both like, we don't want to be here. But there's another kind of caveat to this, or exception. If two planets, and you probably won't find this anywhere, but if two planets are in their own sign, aspecting each other, and usually when each of these planets individually are retrograde, it's bad. But if they're both across from each other and retrograde, it can be very, very, very more powerful and more indirectly positive than usual. And I'm going to explain why. Okay, so you guys hopefully understood the concept that I was trying to explain when Mercury, or when any planet is retrograde and in its own sign or exaltation sign. So let's take Jupiter. Jupiter is the guru. So the guru is in the sign of detachment, which is great. Okay, it's retrograde, so it's like, we don't really feel like detaching. And when a planet is retrograde, it's kind of trying to do the opposite. So it's kind of trying to do the Virgo-y things. Okay, so it's like the guru, he's in the sign of detachment, and he's like, dude, I really don't feel like it. He naturally represents detachment, and he's in the sign of detachment. He's detaching, but he's like, man, I really don't want to do this. Now you have the rational intelligence Mercury. Okay, so let's just say this is like a priest guru, and this is like, I guess you can say like an investment banker or some corporate worker, very high prestige corporate worker, CEO, whatever, which just represents Mercury. Mercury's in the sign of Virgo, which is like great decision making. Okay, this is great. But now Mercury's like, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to detach, right? And it's like, okay, but they're aspecting each other. Okay, so what that means is that imagine both of these two, they're like roommates in an apartment. Imagine there's a 2-room apartment and they're roommates. Jupiter, or the priest, he's naturally really good at detaching and all, and he's detaching, but he doesn't want to do it. This guy, he's naturally really good at decision making. He's currently decision making, but he wants to let go. So this guy is like, oh, wow, I want to do what you're doing. And this guy is like, I want to do what you're doing, right? So they're living in the same apartment, trying to get tips from each other, okay? But in the process, because they're both retrograde, and this is only because they're both retrograde, it happens that they'll kind of feed off of each other. Like this guy's naturally representing detaching. He notices that this guy is representing decision making, but he wants to detach. But this guy wants to do decision making. So he's going to tell him like, hey, why are you trying to detach? Just focus on your decision making. And this guy, he notices that this guy's trying to do decision making, but he's really good at detaching, which is what this guy wants to do currently retrograde. So he's going to tell him, which is the Jupiter in this situation, that, hey, why are you trying to focus on all this intense decision making and stuff like that? Just detach, relax. You're already really good at that. I'm telling you, this is the way to go. So they're both going to attempt to do what the other one's doing, but because they're both retrograde, they're kind of they could, if your spiritual elevation is elevated enough, or like, I guess you can say your mental state is elevated enough that, or your awareness is elevated enough that you can notice that they're both trying to do what each other does, and they're both kind of going to tell each other that, hey, just kind of try to stay where you are. Okay, don't fool yourself. Okay, now this was a little bit of a complicated example, but I thought it was extremely necessary here and a good opportunity to explain this concept. Now, what does this mean to you, right? So I'm going to tell you. This means this Mercury retrograde, it's really, really strong. This is the one I'm going to focus on, especially since the video is about this. The Mercury retrograde is strong. You could get frustrated a lot mentally. Okay? The way to fight your frustrations, and I know this kind of sounds like something that you've already heard before, but anytime you get frustrated, you need to detach from whatever you're getting frustrated from. And the way you do that is by identifying the actual root cause of what is frustrating you and detach from that. I will give you an example. Let's say your spouse or somebody you're dating is frustrating you. You might think the root cause is them, but it most likely is not. The root cause is whatever attachment of expectation you are having of that person that is frustrating you. Let's just say you think someone is not doing something properly, okay? You naturally, this Mercury retrograde could cause you to think that, oh, it's the other person, that's the root cause, I need to detach from that person. No. You have an expectation that somebody should be acting in a certain way. So now you need to detach from that expectation, that mental expectation that you have of that person. Okay? So that's what you need to do. And just for this one, whenever because the Jupiter's retrograde and I kind of covered a lot on it, if you do feel a little bit lost or something like that, the best way to counter with that is to just use your brain, your rational intelligence, and just see what you think you should be doing. Okay? That's basically the name of the game of what you should do here. Now, I will tell you some things, because these energies are real strong, there could be some hiccups here and there. So I will tell you some things to avoid, to try to avoid any hiccups or disasters. Watch your speech. Do not make any big purchases. Do not make any big decisions. Or do not plan anything. Don't plan any trips. Don't plan to buy anything. Don't plan to don't plan any big purchases or changes or any big moves in general. Don't plan to leave someone. Don't plan to find someone. Don't plan to start taking anybody seriously. Don't plan anything. Don't plan anything, and don't try to detach from anything without using very, very good judgment. But the detachment is okay. But like I said, if you're gonna detach, identify the root cause. But definitely the Mercury is very, very, very hammered, and especially because it is dealing with it's combusted dealing with the sun, as well as a debilitated Venus, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And like I said, it's retrograde in its own exaltation and its own sign. You need to be very, very careful about the Mercury thing. So just try to avoid those things that I just listed if possible. And like I said, if you're going to detach, that's great, but just make sure you detach from the root cause. Don't let Mercury kind of influence your Jupiter too negatively here. And, you try to detach from something that's not the root cause, because it's not actually fixing anything, okay? Now, a couple other things. Throughout this retrograde transit, especially more towards the middle end, around September 23rd, look at the exact date and time for wherever you guys are, but around then is when the sun crosses Mercury retrograde. So the Mercury's going retrograde and then the sun's crossing it. This is going to be very, very extreme. And then, because you already have the situation plus throw in the sun. And then 4 days later, you had the Mercury crossing a debilitated Venus. And the sun's not too far away. And vice versa, when Mercury crosses the sun, the Venus is not too far behind. So these periods are going to be very, very intense. So what does this mean? Around September 23rd, when the Mercury crosses the sun, and around September 23rd, and then September 27th, when Mercury crosses the debilitated Venus, you need to look out for the negative energies that those two planets respectively represent. So for example, around September 23rd, or a little bit before and after that as well, the retrograde Mercury is crossing the sun. So the sun's energy is influencing the Mercury retrograde. And I know this video is about Mercury retrograde, but overall, the Mercury retrograde is also influencing the sun. So the sun represents what? Our ego, our identity. Our ego and identity, it's in Virgo, trying to make the right decisions, right? It's trying to assess your wants versus your needs or things like that. But because the Mercury is retrograde crossing it, your ego could get in the way, and you could think, oh, hey, let me just do some really wild things or take some really wild risks for that you think are calculated, but that are not actually calculated at all. So that's why I said, especially around the September 23rd time, don't take any calculated risks. I would strongly recommend. Okay, your ego is going to be under huge temperament. And when this happens, just keep yourself in check. Definitely don't say anything to anybody like bad. And don't just accept any humbleness or humiliation you could feel. It doesn't mean anything's actually bad happening to you, or even if something bad is actually happening to you. It's all pretty subjective because of the situation. Like any little thing could, piss you off. But just accept that. Accept that you're not in control. Accept that you're not, number one in this world. Okay, just accept these kind of things when the sun crosses it. Also, when Mercury crosses the Venus, don't do anything dumb with any relations in your life. Okay, or buying anything. Okay, so this means don't try to argue with your spouse. Don't try to argue with your siblings, especially your younger siblings, but also possibly your older siblings, especially like older sister. But any siblings, don't try to argue with them. Don't try to argue with anybody. That's the thing, because the Venus in Virgo, it's trying to analyze its wants versus needs, but Venus gets debilitated here. So what this means is that your Venetian happiness is lost. So when these two join forces, this is not good. You could basically feel less happy or less satisfied overall in life, and that Mercury's right there. So because of that root cause, your Mercury could express itself in the not most positive way. So we need to just identify both of these. Identify that, hey, you're only feeling a little bit unhappy and stuff because of this transit, so let's try to cool ourselves. And even if we can't, accept how we feel and, accept the loss of enjoyment due to the fact that, we're under constant dopamine rushes and things like this, hey, we're not feeling too hot, but let's just really control ourselves, okay? Because at least if we're not feeling too hot, that's fine. But if it doesn't leave us for this temporary transit, it's okay. We'll get over it. But if it leaves us and we end up saying something or doing something that's not good, this is not amazing. So watch out for that before and after and around September 27th. But overall, like I said, this Mercury transit is very, very strong. I would recommend you taking this seriously, especially if you notice the effects a good 2 to 3 weeks before this retrograde actually started. And like I said, just listen to the things I said, and just remember what I said about the Mercury and Jupiter aspecting each other, but they're both retrograde. They're both strong, super strong retrograde in their own signs, and for Mercury, it's primary sign and exaltation sign. But if used properly, especially because they're both retrograde, not just one is retrograde, they can both indirectly help each other out and help you really elevate and grow spiritually in the long run. And it's really, really powerful, okay, if you can use it properly in the way that I said. Okay, analyze your frustrations, analyze your feeling of lostness, or I guess you can say analyze your anxieties and analyze your depression, and kind of go from there. And like I said, the name of the game is to help identify root causes. Okay, so I think that's going to be it for this video. If you have any questions or comments about any of this, I know this was a lot, you can let me know. And until next time, which will be soon because I'm back from vacation, there'll be more transit videos soon. Until next time, talk to you guys later. Thank you all very much for watching.